do we know if there was more than one man involved in this? Because there are certain suggestions that this could have been the work of more than one accused rapist. Initial reports suggested that there were two semen samples. Is what is needed to be done, has it been done, or is there more yet that the doctors are hoping for and expecting? Dr. Dhar, I'll start with you.
So, Barkha, thank you. I think you mentioned in some details as to what happened to the lady in question. And I think the amount of injuries that have been described, there's a pelvic bone that's been described as being fractured. So we have seen the victim, the perpetrator of the crime, the guy who's been arrested. And we also know the lady. I mean, I work in Kolkata. I am a chest physician, and I know the lady in question personally. It is impossible for the lady to have had the fractures, the injuries that she's had, been given to her by one person. I say impossible. I never say impossible, but I think it's well nigh very unlikely that there's been one person who's actually caused so much of harm. So I think there's more to the story which will evolve over a period of time. I think this gentleman was probably one of the people involved in the crime, but I would be very surprised if this was the work of one man. I think there will be more than two or more for sure, who was involved in this crime. I think there's more to the story coming.
Then what you're saying, Dr. Dhar, and again, it's so important because you're saying the scale of the injuries, the scale of the pelvic injuries point to the work of at least two, maybe more. Basically, then, Dr. Dhar, we are looking at a gang rape. We are looking at a gang rape and not the work of one man. And that one arrest that has been made is not the full scale of what we need at this point. Am I correct in summarizing you?
You're right, Barkha. And you have to understand that while the gentleman who's been arrested is a civic volunteer, for someone, the lady was in the seminar room in her own department. And people who are an insider would only know that the lady was there at the time by herself. So I think there needs to be more explanations as to how the lady was found alone in her room. The degree of injuries that we talked about are too much to be explained by just one man being there. So all of this put together, I would suspect that there are more people. This is, I'll put it in the words that you said, Barkha, this is the gang rape rather than one person who's actually assaulted this lady.
In which case, where does the needle of suspicion, Dr. Dhar, fall? Because you're saying something very important here, and I want our audience to take a moment to reflect on it. This is a gang rape by the evidence and the scale of the injuries that have been found on the victim's body. Where does the needle of suspicion fall? For example, about this one arrest, we know that he was a civic volunteer. Are we looking at volunteers like him? Are we looking at someone inside the hospital? What are we actually looking at?
So I think this civic volunteer has, it's been claimed that he is actually an insider, although he should not be. He's been found roaming around the hospital in the past. I think it has to be someone who's got good knowledge about what happens in the hospital, where the on-call rooms are, where the seminar room is. And at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, unless it's an insider, you would not really know what's going on with the whereabouts of this lady. So I think we shouldn't hypothesize as to who the individual might be, but it suffice to say, I think it's important that it is someone who knows about the whereabouts of this lady, the on-call, the chest department. All of this needs to be known for the crime to be perpetrated the way it has been. So I'll keep it there. I think the rest goes into the realms of hypothesis, I think.
Okay, so this much you are saying, Dr. Dhar. One, that the nature of injuries, and you mentioned pelvic injuries and a pelvic fracture. Am I correct?
That's what we have heard. So that's what the handwritten. So, there's such a lot circulating on the social media. So what's come to us has been the fact that there has been multiple fractures, including a pelvic fracture. And you understand that there's a huge amount of force which needs to be applied if a lady in her early 20s or mid 20s needs to have a fracture of the pelvis. And I would think that it's going to be very difficult for one man, especially the man whose photograph you've just shown a little while ago, for him to commit a crime of the range that's been described.
Well,